Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I am talking about a book that I recently read, which I think might be the most amazing book I've ever read. Big claim, I know, but it's called Doing Good Better by William MacAskill, and it's all about effective altruism. And as soon as I read it, I knew I wanted to do a video on it. So don't worry if you don't know what effective altruism is or any of that. I'm going to cover all of it in this video. But basically, what the book does is it looks at giving money to charity and to good causes in a really scientific way to try and work out the best use of time and the best use of money and the best use of you as a human resource. It looks at what you should do with your career, what you should do as a volunteer, what you should do as a charity donor, and it's totally different to everything else that I've ever thought or read or heard about ethical industries and giving to charity and all those kind of things before. And it's a really amazing book. It's very based in science and academia and very well researched, but it's also quite easy reading. It's very well written. It's not like too heavy. So obviously the point of this video is to say go read that book because it's amazing. But I also wanted to cover a few of the points that really stood out to me from it, and a few of the things that I think might be slight gaps within it or kind of assumptions that they make that maybe don't hold true for humans that are slightly less rational than they assume in this like very scientific academic book. So the kind of basic premise of the book is that time and money is finite, so you have to make difficult decisions, the same as a doctor can only save one patient in an emergency. They have a limited amount of time and they have to decide who is going to be saved. And so it says if you're going to give $100 to charity or $1 million, then which charity should you give it to? If you want to volunteer an hour of your time, how is that best spent? And it says all charities are doing good things. You know, everyone is out there with good intentions, but some are making a much bigger difference than others, kind of dollar for dollar. So it lays out 5 questions that you can use to assess how well your money is going to be spent, which are things like, is it a problem that would be solved anyway? Is it the best use of your specific skills and resources? How effective is the charity? How likely is the success and how good is the success? Because even if it's not very likely, if it's really, really good, like global warming, if it saves the entire planet from exploding, then that's really good, even if it's quite unlikely because the research we're doing is still so early, things like that. So it's very interesting, the 5 questions that they lay out. I'm not going to go super into them because you should just read the book. But the thing that I found especially interesting are the areas they cover, which are really big subjects that they totally flip on their head. Quite a lot of the things in this video you may disagree with, and I am not an expert in effective altruism, so if you want to have a bit more detail backing up why they're saying these things, then check out the book. But I was particularly struck by 7 different kind of big buzzword areas that they address in the book, which are things that have totally flipped on their head for me, things that I really supported, which I now wouldn't, or things that I wasn't that interested in, which I'm now going to donate my money to. So those 7, the first one is disaster relief, which the book says you shouldn't donate to because there's already so much money flooding there. It's big in the press and it gets a disproportionate amount of money for the amount of suffering compared to something not so glamorous, if you can say that, like smallpox or deworming kids in schools, something like that. Then it also looks at sweatshops, which you guys will know as a ethical shopper. I buy a lot of secondhand, and I know that sweatshops are a very controversial area, but amazingly, the book actually says that sweatshops are not as bad as we think, and we shouldn't be buying from, you know, made in Britain because it's taking jobs away from countries where the people really need the money, really need the jobs. And it says, yes, you should lobby the brands to source more ethically in those countries, treat those people better, but you shouldn't use your purchasing power to buy not from those countries because those people still really need that money, which is very interesting and very controversial. Then the third one is fair trade, which Effective Altruism seems to totally disagree with fair trade because it says the only countries and farms and supply chains which can afford to get the fair trade sticker are in proportionally richer countries. So actually the very poor producers of things like chocolate or coffee, if you buy from them instead, you're actually giving more money proportionally, because $1 to them is worth a lot more than $1 to someone in a relatively developed country that can afford to qualify for fair trade. So it recommends in a supermarket you don't buy fair trade, you buy from the poorest supplier that you can. And of course all of these are super revolutionary, super controversial, so if these are things that you do agree with, then check out the book and see if the arguments hold with you or if it's still something that you feel strongly about. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments after you've read the book, not before, whether you have changed your mind on these things or whether you think that actually this book is just insane. But anyway, the next one is carbon offsetting, and that was something that I haven't been that interested in up until now. And it says that with carbon emissions, you can actually erase your emission footprint if you donate to, they recommend a charity called Cool Earth, which protects the rainforest. And they say that it's not like getting forgiveness. The example they use is cheating on your partner, the damage is already done and you can get forgiven and it feels like it's erased, but actually it's not really because you've done irreparable damage. Whereas by protecting areas of the rainforest that otherwise would have been destroyed, you are actually erasing your carbon footprint, so you can really, offsetting is actually like totally a fresh page. And incredibly, when they look at the numbers, they reckon that by giving $5 a year to Cool Earth, that is the same carbon neutraling as if you became vegetarian, which is obviously a big reason people become vegetarian is to reduce their carbon emissions. So by giving $5 a year, you can stay eating meat if that's your reason for becoming vegetarian rather than animal welfare. And by giving $100 a year, you can eradicate all of what an average developed world country person would be creating in carbon per year. So I fly a lot, so I actually think I'm going to start giving to that charity maybe a couple of $100s a year, because if I can erase all of my carbon emissions for such a small amount of money, then I think that's incredible. The next one is already something that's close to my heart if you guys have watched my Am I Vegan video, is vegetarianism, and they are very pro becoming vegetarian or vegan because the amount of animal suffering is so huge. Even if you value animal lives at a lot less than you value a human life, the multipliers are so high. There's so many animals who are in suffering because of food production. But they say if you don't want to give up meat altogether, then they recommend you give up chicken and eggs, followed by pork, because the numbers of them who are suffering, the degree of their suffering is much higher, and the numbers that you consume. So I can't remember the statistics exactly, but if you in a year, you consume something like 1,000 chickens or 1 cow. So if you give up chickens, you're saving 1,000 lives, whereas if you give up beef, you're only saving 1 life. So if you double your beef consumption, you're only killing 1 more animal compared to if you stop eating chicken, you're saving 1,000. Those aren't the exact numbers. I'll actually have the numbers come up on the screen, but that to me really blew my mind. Now, when I'm choosing from a menu, my first choice is going to be vegetarian, but my second choice will be beef, followed by pork, followed by chicken, which is not the way that I would have done it before. Normally I'd think, oh, I'll have eggs because they're not vegan, but they are at least vegetarian. But now I'm thinking I'm going to avoid eggs and chicken before I avoid beef, which is a totally different mindset to what I had before. The final two that they look at are the value of voting. They look at how much marginal impact you can have, and should you vote, is it worth your time? And then also the very typically accepted way of measuring charity effectiveness before has been to look at the proportion of money they spend on operational costs and the CEO's salary, things like that. And this book debunks why that's not a good measure. So even just from those 7, I hope that's got you excited to read the book, because that is a freaking incredible list of things that blew my mind. But that is only the first half of the book. In the second half, it looks at what you should do with your life and with your career. And if you're making a career choice, should you go into something where you can kind of make a difference, like charity work or politics, or should you go into finance where you can earn a lot of money because you're naturally blessed with this amazing mathematical mind, and then use that money to donate to charity rather than working for a charity because you can make more difference that way because of your unique personal skills and position? Or should you go into something that isn't typically seen as ethical but where you can make a huge difference, like maybe you could go into science and you can develop alternative meat products that don't involve animals? Or in one of the videos I watched, they give an example of someone who was the guy who pressed the button on the nuclear weapons, and he received, I think, a false positive to say, yes, press the button. I think it might have been Russia. But he said, that feels like a false positive, I'm not going to press the button. And so he saved millions of lives, way more than people who have started a charity who you would typically put on a pedestal compared to a guy who presses a nuclear button. So it's a really interesting look into what you should do with your life if you truly want to make a difference in the world. And one of the big things that they say that I've always been quite interested in is about you not following your passion. And actually, I've been thinking about doing a video on this anyway, so let me know in the comments below if you would like a video about why you shouldn't follow your passion. And it looks a lot into that, of how passions are maybe not a good measure of your value and also your expected happiness, and maybe following your passion won't make you happy compared to following your skill set or abilities. So, on to a couple of flaws that I see with the theory, which I think are easy to overcome but not really covered in the book. The first one is that it assumes you feel all human lives are equal. And this is the kind of thing where if I said to you, do you think all human lives have equal value? Should everybody be saved? You'd be like, yes, of course. But if you think about the charities you give to, you probably give to charities like cancer research because one of your relatives had cancer, or you give to charities which might affect you more, like maybe your family history means you'll probably get dementia, so you're more likely to give to a dementia charity. So I would guess that your current charitable giving doesn't assume all lives are equal, and would you save 1,000 lives of children in Africa, or do you kind of think rather save like my own people who live in America or England? So I think in principle we all believe all human lives are equal, but I think it's something the book doesn't really consider, that as irrational human beings we probably value our families' lives over strangers we've never met, and it's something that I think the book wants you to overcome and start giving to charities where the money will actually go further and will save a lot of lives, even though they're people who you will never meet. So that kind of gave me a bit of personal reflection of, do I honestly think all lives are equal, and am I demonstrating that through my charitable giving and through my actions on a daily basis? But one of the videos I watched by them opened the presentation, I think it was a TED Talk, with CCTV footage of a 2 or 3 year old girl in China being run over by a truck, and how many people just walked past and didn't do anything, and actually several cars ran her over in the middle of the road just during this one bit of footage, and pedestrians were just walking past. And he was saying, watching that video, you're thinking, I would never do that. I would stop and help that girl. I would take her to hospital, whatever. But then the conclusion of the video was, you are doing this, where it says, a child is dying every second. You are doing that constantly. You're walking past a child in China who is being run over by a truck. You're just not physically doing it. And that's something which I've heard before, but still really strikes me every time. When you think about it as difficult decisions, every time you give to a proportionally rich kind of Western charity like cancer research, you are taking money away from a charity which will save lives in Africa. So you do have to think of everything as very finite, which actually brings me on to my second flaw, I think, in the book, which is that it kind of assumes everyone is giving a fixed amount to charity. So maybe I say my budget for charity this year is £200. I have to decide how to spend it. Whereas actually what happens to me is maybe I have a few direct debits where I'm giving £10 a month to some charity and that's fixed. But then your friend is doing a fun run and you think, oh, I'll give her an extra £10. And it's not like it's come out of an overall charitable budget. It just encourages me to give extra. And what's actually more likely is I will cut out something like a coffee rather than thinking I won't give to another charity later because I already gave my allotted budget. So what I actually think something like disaster relief it makes you give extra because you feel so compelled and it's all in the news and it's really sad. So you actually give extra money to a charity, which means then it is good. The only problem is that if you're giving it to that charity instead of one which is more effective. But what I think we can take from that is to use it as a reminder. So when there is some big tsunami and you think that's really tragic, I really want to get involved, if you believe in effective altruism, you would think, I'm not going to give to that disaster relief because it's not the most effective use of my money, but it has reminded me and compelled me to give to charity, so I'm now going to give that £20 to a charity which effective altruism recommends. Does that kind of make sense? And I actually use this when I'm traveling, for example, in India. If I see beggars on the street who I really want to give to and I really want to make a difference to them, but I prefer not to give to the actual person on the street because I know, I've actually done a whole video about this, about kind of ethical travel, but the person on the street generally isn't getting the money, they're part of a hierarchy and a mob, so I use that as a reminder to then go home and give to a charity for homeless people in India. So I think you can kind of use it as triggers, where if you're reminded by an amazing your friend doing a fun run that you want to give to a charity, then maybe you just give the money to a charity that's more effective with your donation. So that's my kind of 2 flaws. To conclude the video, there was one really interesting fact that to me stood out even more than anything else in the book, which was that smallpox was eradicated in 1973. And in 1973, would you choose world peace until today or to eradicate smallpox? And I think everybody would choose world peace. You'd say, yeah, I really want world peace from 1973 until 2018, that would be incredible. But eradicating smallpox saved 10 times as many lives as world peace would have done in this period. So that just really showed me we need to be looking at the numbers and we should be treating charity as a science rather than just as a free-for-all driven by emotions. If you can save 10 times as many lives from eradicating smallpox, which is not particularly glamorous or interesting, or world peace, which is what everybody at Miss World says they want, then that to me is such a striking difference. So if you'd be interested in a video from me about which charities I now give to, it's a bit personal, but maybe it'd be interesting to you guys. Let me know in the comments, and also let me know if you've read the book, if you're now going to read the book, if you disagree with literally everything I just said. I know a lot of it was quite controversial, but I promise you it's all backed up in great detail in the book. I just don't have time to explain all of it in this video. But thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe and let me know any video requests you've got coming up, and I'll see you in the next week. Bye!